Good morning to our YouTubers. Today is Tuesday, October 27th, and we're learning Tanya chapter 39. Fascinating stuff that we're learning about. We've recently in Tanya that we've unlocked the key to our purpose in this world. Tanya revealed to us why it is that God wants us created. What are we doing here? Good morning, Harvey. How you doing? What are we doing here? Why did God put us here in the first place? And it was a profound revelation. Good morning, Stephanie. As we came to the realization in recent chapters of Tanya that God needs us. He put us here because he needs us. What does he need us for? To build him a home. In brief, the way we explained this idea was that God created a world where he voluntarily hid himself. What we call a spiritually dark world, where godliness is in exile by its own choice. God concealed himself in the spiritually dark world, where the amount of godliness that you see around yourself is absolutely zilch. You see no godliness around you in this physical world, the world of Asiya. And our role as Jews in this world is to be able to engage this physical world with Torah and mitzvahs. And every single time that we use a physical object for Torah and mitzvahs, we sanctify and we sublimate that physical object, illuminating it with the presence of God. Ultimately, the sum total of all of our efforts over the past 4,000 or 5,000 years will ultimately accumulate to the tipping point, which is the coming of Mashiach. And Mashiach is all about the lifting of the veil, the revelation of what we've achieved, the godly light, which has been laying dormant ever since those mitzvahs and Torahs have been done, is now revealed. And that's why the prophets tell us that the era of Mashiach is simply an era of godly awareness. It's an era of godly consciousness, where we can experience the fruits of our labor. And that is the doctrine of Dira B'Tachtonim. Dira B'Tachtonim, which means a home in the lower world, The doctrine of Dira B'Tachtonim, a home in the lower worlds. That, my friends, is the reason that God put us in this world. That's what we've learned in Tanya. Good morning, Lucy, Stephanie, Marty. Great to have you with us. We learned further in Tanya. I'm just recapping, just putting things back into perspective. I mean, that's a very inspiring and empowering perspective when we realize that your choice for lunch today, your choice of your next vacation or your next experience today is something which God is anxiously waiting for with bated breath, anthropomorphically speaking. God is empowered by your good choices and disappointed by your bad ones, because he put you here for a reason. Imagine the scene that you're going to the Super Bowl. Maybe you're going to the finals of the World Cup soccer or the World Championship or something. And you're looking at the field and you're watching the two teams playing. And one of the players, the guy who's supposed to be batting in the baseball game, or the guy in the football who's supposed to be running the ball across the field over the line, forgets that he's playing. Imagine the guy forgets that he's playing, for heaven's sake, and everybody's looking at him and they're like, what's that guy doing? Imagine if he decides to sit down on the floor and just decide to take a nap or have a picnic. It's my life. I've got to take care of myself. You look at the guy and you say, like, what on earth are you doing? We put you on the field for a reason. We're rooting for you. We're waiting for you to get that ball into the goals. And that's effectively what's happening with us. When we shirk our responsibilities, we walk away from our obligations as Jews for which we were placed into this world, and we say, actually, I think I'm going to take a nap. Or I think I'm going to do my own thing and I'm not responsible to anybody else. It's with that kind of approach that we're profoundly disappointing to all those that put us here. Let's not make that mistake. Good morning, Rob Berger. Good morning, Terry Zweig. Great to see everybody. As we developed this theme, we said it's not enough for us to build a home for God in this world through our actions. Because, see, there's two parts to building a home for God. The way I explained it was that you're building a house. So it's nice to have a house, a shelter. But once you have a shelter, it's kind of a little uncomfortable. You want to have your own decorations. You want it to be decorated in your own style. And that's how you turn a house into a home. You know, the four walls create a house, which gives me shelter, but it's the personal touch that allows me to feel comfortable in my home. So the way Tanya explained that was that the action mitzvahs that we fulfill, the physical lulav and the physical esrog and the matzah and the wine and the money for charity and the food that we eat, all of that is very, very mundane, but it's the action mitzvahs which draw down godliness to this world. But there was a flip side to that coin. And Tanya introduced us to the power of mindfulness when we build a home for God. You can't just mindlessly observe mitzvahs and study Torah. There's a value to that, don't get me wrong. There's a value to studying Torah and fulfilling mitzvahs mindlessly. And we're going to learn about that today. The action in and of itself of the mitzvah and the action of the Torah study in and of itself is what draws down godliness to this world. You're making a house for God, but you're not necessarily making a home for God, because what degree of godliness is drawn to this world depends on the degree of your mindfulness. In Hebrew, we call that kavanah. K-A-V-A-N-A. Kavanah. Kavanah is the degree of focus, of concentration, of intent, of mindfulness, whilst observing the mitzvah or studying the Torah. So whilst the action draws down God to this world, the question is how much God, or what quality, what frequency of godliness is drawn down to this God. Is it a low-grade frequency or is it a very high-grade frequency? That depends on the concentration, on the mindfulness, on the kavanah, whilst observing the mitzvah. And that's what we're going to learn about today and what we've been learning about in the past 2 weeks. You know, when you speak about degrees of godliness, let's just apply it on a very practical level. What degree of frequency do you have with your spouse this morning? Your spouse. What frequency of love is there between you and your child, or you and your best friend, or your closest acquaintance today? Think about that. Are you experiencing today a low-level frequency of love with your spouse or your child? Or are you experiencing an elevated degree of frequency of love with your spouse or your loved one today? That degree of frequency is not just about your presence, it's about your focus, it's about your words, it's about your concentration, your intent. I imagine that you would understand that this makes sense. If it doesn't, please do comment. I would love to hear your comments and thoughts, both on YouTube or on Facebook. Always good to engage with you and your thoughts and your feedback and your comments. If you have any questions, do please. Would love to hear from you. Meanwhile, if you don't mind to like the video and share the video on Facebook and on YouTube, that would be very much appreciated, to be able to spread the light and to spread the love. So what we're learning about today, again, a quick one more summary, is that in the beginning of chapter 39, let's say the first 3 quarters of the chapter. Today we're going to do the last quarter, hopefully. In the first 3 quarters of chapter 39 of Tanya, we learned about the different kinds of frequencies that are drawn down through our kavanah, through our intention. And we spoke about the 4 worlds, the world of Asiya, which is the action world that we live in right now. Then there's the world of the world of creation, Yetzirah, which is the world of emotion. Above that is the second world, which is the world of creation, of intellect. And above that, we learned last week about the first world, the world of Atzilus, the world of emanation. And we said like this, we said that if your mitzvahs are emotionally, if your connection with God really is emotionally motivated, if it's more instinctive, drawn out of your natural love and natural fear of God, if it's more emotional, but a natural, an instinctive kind of emotion, just like you have a natural love for your child or a natural love for your spouse. If your relationship with God is on a natural, instinctive level, then you reach the reward of your mitzvahs in Torah is to the world of Yetzirah, which is the world of emotion, the world of formation. That's the third of the four worlds from the top down. We're in the fourth world. This would go one up, which is the world of Yetzirah, formation, where emotion is dominant. And that's what's called the lower Gan Eden. So the reward of our mitzvah is to reaches the world of Yetzirah. And what degree of frequency of godliness do we draw down? When we do the mitzvah, we draw down only that Yetzirah level to this physical world as we make a home for God in this world. From the reward, you can understand from the reward, you can understand the investment, I guess. So what degree of frequency of godliness you're drawing down, you can identify, says the Alter Rebbe, through the reward that you reach. So if you're more spiritually mature and your divine service is not motivated by instinctive and natural love, but by mindful meditation. Mindful meditation in relationships, for example, would be when you love your spouse even when you have every reason to not like your spouse. Or when you choose to, if maybe a child comes out as gay and that happens to stand against everything that you believe in, and you manage to mindfully focus your meditation to say, I love this child no matter what. Right? Again, there could be I hope that example is not a political example, but it brings out what might be an instinctive reaction versus an overwhelming or an overcoming mindful concentration. If your relationship with God is mindfully meditated, then your reward reaches the second world, the world of Bria, the world of creation, where intellect dominates, and therefore the degree of frequency, the energy of godliness that you draw down when you do a mitzvah and study Torah with such intent, with such kavana, is one that comes from the second world, the world of Bria. And finally, what we learned last week was the world of Atzilus, the world of emanation, which is not dominated by emotion and not by intellect, but dominated by intimacy. It's a world of surrender. It's a world of intimate connection, not because it makes sense and not because you understand, just because we are one. It's a world of unity. And if your mitzvahs are motivated not by emotion and understanding, but by devotion, if that's the degree of connection that you have with Hashem, then your reward reaches to the world of Atzilus, the world of emanation, and the frequency of godliness that you fulfill, that you draw to this world when you make a home for God, is from the world of Atzilus. And I want to use this to explain an interesting enigma that I've been struggling with. In today's Hayom Yom is the daily teaching of the Rebbe. In today's Hayom Yom, he tells a story of the fifth Chabad Rebbe, the Rebbe Rashab. When he was a boy of 4 or 5 years old, he came to his grandfather, the Tzemach Tzedek, and he said to his grandfather, the boy who is the future fifth Chabad Rebbe, said to his grandfather, the third Chabad Rebbe, crying. He said, why is it that in this week's Torah portion, God revealed himself to Abraham? Why did he reveal himself to Abraham and not reveal himself to me? Asks the 4 or 5 year old future Rebbe, the Rebbe Rashab. And his Zayd answered him as follows. He says, when a Jew at the age of 99 years old decides that it's time for him to circumcise himself in a covenant with God, he is worthy of godly revelation. That's an interesting answer. What made him worthy of a godly revelation, what made Abraham worthy of a godly revelation, was that at the age of 99 years old, he was willing to undergo a surgery, a painful surgery, a circumcision, and to enter into a covenant with God. My understanding of this Hayom Yom today is that Abraham exhibited total and utter surrender before God. God, you want me to stand on my head for 17 hours straight? Done. You want me to go right now to Antarctica and come straight back? Done. No questions asked. Abraham's relationship with God was Merkava, which means a chariot. Just like a chariot doesn't ask questions of the rider. Whatever the rider tells the chariot to do, it does. So to Abraham's relationship with God was Merkava, total surrender, total intimacy. If that's the degree of your commitment to God, then you draw down every action as an equal and opposite reaction. You draw down a revelation from the world of Atzilus, the world of emanation, the world of intimacy. And that is the revelation of Hashem. So when Hashem revealed himself to Abraham, that was the product of Abraham's own commitment. Remember, in next week's Torah portion, Abraham had a bris. And the third day, which was most painful, God reveals himself to him. And that is at the very end of this week's Torah portion, and that's the opening of next week's Torah portion. So that's the explanation of today's Yom Yom, friends, which ties in perfectly with what we're learning today. The degree of your relationship with God, or the motivation, the kavanah, the mindfulness that motivates your actions, dictates two things: what reward you will achieve at the end in the next world, that your soul will rise up all the way to higher than Gan Eden, higher than heaven, higher than paradise, higher than the higher Gan Eden, to the world of emanation, the world of intimacy. And the frequency, the impact of your actions, the frequency of godliness that you draw down when you make for God a home in this world, which is the purpose of our existence, is the highest grade home possible. However, today, friends, the Alter Rebbe brings us straight back down to ground zero. Good morning, Bob Wertheimer and Dean and Ed Hockman. Good morning, Miriam. Good morning, Rob Sanders. Good morning, Elaine, and everybody that's here with us. If you have any questions, if I'm losing you here, friends, please let me know. Slow me down, ask me questions, challenge me, agree with me. Always love to hear from you. And don't forget, friends, if you can, share the video and like the video, please, so that we can spread this light and love. You know how many Jews have told me? They said, Rabbi, I wish I knew this stuff 40 years ago. Why? Where were you 40 years ago? So in most cases, I said I wasn't born, but 40 years ago. But it's our obligation to share the light and to share the love. There are Jews out there that are searching, and if you could just simply click the share button or the like button, you never know which of your friends might be inspired to be able to learn some profound Tanya, some teachings of Torah on a whole new level, which, as we say here in the morning Minyaneers, we say is not what you learned in Hebrew school. In any event, again, I love a good challenge. If you agree or disagree with what I'm saying, friends, please do let me know. Post here your comments. I would love to hear your questions, your comments, your critique. We even get missionaries here on this forum once in a while, people from other countries. Good morning, Susan. It's so nice to see you. Welcome, welcome. We would always appreciate your input. So where we continue now, friends, and again, I just want to encourage you also to review these classes. You'll find them all on YouTube. If you go to youtube.com/Jewish Gardens, that's youtube.com/Jewish Gardens, and look under the Tanya playlist. You can review these classes because they're not that easy. Let me tell you, when I teach a class like this, I need to review it about 7 times before I properly understand it. And that's after I've learned it already for the past 20 years. This is deep stuff. It's not a drive-by Judaism. It's not something you can really scroll through on your Facebook feed and then sort of like expect to really understand. This really takes ruminating through the levels of Chachma Bina Das, of idea, of understanding, and meditation, of realization, to make what you understand in your mind something which you can feel in your heart. Anyways, where we go today, somebody posted a comment, Marty, scuba versus snorkeling. Yes, I love that. I love that analogy. So you could be choosing to snorkel. You know, your analogy, Marty, I just want to use this. I want to say this. Scuba versus snorkeling, I want to say, is really the difference of what kind of relationship you have with your wife, Marty. I mean, not getting personal here, but you know, all of us can ask ourselves, what kind of relationship do we have with our spouses or our loved ones? Is our relationship with our loved ones a snorkeling relationship? Or is it maybe it's not even underwater, maybe we're on the beach still? Or are we a scuba relationship? Do we have the courage to go down deep with our loved ones? Do we have a deep, high quality degree of love with our loved ones, or is it a very shallow relationship? We sort of live together because it's too expensive to get divorced. We live together because, you know, the health insurance benefits are much better this way. Or do you have the courage to go deeper in your relationship with your spouse? Or maybe you're still outside the water, you never even got your feet wet. And that's the question which we have to ask ourselves in Tanya, in our relationship with God as well. Are you still having a relationship with God, the same relationship that you had when you were 4 years old and 14 years old and 24 and 34 and 44 and 64? Because you've never deepened your relationship with God. You're still stuck outside, getting your toes wet in the surf. Or do you have the courage to go deep, deep, deep into levels of emotion, instinctive emotion, mindful emotion, or perhaps Merkava level intimacy, surrender, and devotion. Andy, the Merkava concept you applied to Abraham seems to be the opposite of the mindfulness you noted earlier. Okay, it's an interesting point you make there, Andy, that the Merkava is the opposite. Well, it's definitely different. Let's be clear. Mindfulness is motivated by the brain. But like we said last week, you have a yarmulke. We Jews have a yarmulke that sits on top of our brain. Because we say like this, my relationship with God doesn't begin and end with my understanding. There's a part of me which is Yirei Malka, Yarmulka, which means I fear the king. My relationship with the king, my commitment to the king, Yarmulke, is above my understanding. It's more than what I'm able to fathom. You see, if you live your life, Andy, in a relationship, imagine your relationship with your wife was only one of intellect. Imagine, okay? Anything that Hannah told you that made sense, no problem. But anytime she told you something that didn't make sense or asked you something to do that didn't make sense, you'd be like, you're out of your mind. That would not go well, right? It would not go well. You have to straddle both of those lanes in your relationship with your wife to have a functional, healthy, and deep relationship with your wife, right? You got to be able to say, look, when things make sense, it's amazing. And when they don't make sense, I'm going to roll with the punches because I love you forever and for always. So yes, it's a different lane, Andy. Your Merkava concept means unconditional commitment, even when things don't make sense. Even when there's a Holocaust and I don't understand what God is doing or thinking or whatever, I'm still devoted to him. That kind of relationship that we have to have with our spouses, with our loved ones. When things make sense, it's amazing. When they don't make sense, I'm still there for you. I love you forever and for always. So it's not necessarily a conflict. It just says, I trust you unconditionally. I hope that makes sense. Any comments coming in on YouTube? Nope. Just Elaine over there. Quiet. No worries. But thank you for your comments and your feedback, friends. But anyways, I'm going to try to wrap up today's idea where the Alter Rebbe brings us down from Atzilus. We've reached the world of Atzilus. And by the way, the world of emanation, the Alter Rebbe says we reach actually when we daven every day. I think I mentioned this briefly, but when we, in the morning service is actually a ladder, just like Jacob's ladder, which was based on the earth and reaches up to the heaven in his dream. When we start off davening, we start off in the world of action. We then rise through affirmations of the beginning of our prayers. When we speak about God's kindness to us, we start to feel emotion. That's the world of Yetzirah, of formation. We then upgrade to the world of creation, which is intellect, when we come to the meditation of Shema Yisrael, Havaya Elokeinu. And ultimately, when we stand in the Amidah before God, we now stand humbly before God. Our feet together, we don't move. And we bow. We bow our brain, our head, before God. That is the level of Atzilus. We all enter the level of Atzilus in our prayers for like a little fleeting moment. Is what we do when we daven. We're actually going through a journey up to heaven and back when we're going through the morning prayers. And that's actually the reason that the Alter Rebbe says that we, the reward of our mitzvahs is that we actually are able to reach, even if your main level is the level of Bria, the world of intellect, you still get fleeting moments in your reward when you do go up to Atzilus, because of the fact that during our lifetimes we did that. We went to the world of Atzilus while davening. Okay, so what happens now is that what happens to those Jews, those of us that aren't exactly on that elevated level? If we're not able to serve God not with total surrender, the world of Atzilus, and not with mindfulness and meditative emotion, which is the world of Bria, and not even with emotion, we're not even that spiritually advanced or mature. We're kind of just ordinary Yossel the plumbers. We're just ordinary guys. I go to shul because I came to shul yesterday, and because my father went to shul, and because my grandfather went to shul. It's nothing like incredibly meditative here going on. I'm just an ordinary Joe. I go to breakfast and I go to shul and whatever. It's not like anything profound. The Alter Rebbe says, if you're that kind of Jew, that you serve God only out of habit, without inner feeling, then what you're doing is that you're lacking wings. We're going to learn later in Tanya that love and fear are the wings of our soul. A bird can live without wings. If it doesn't have wings, or its wings are like tied up, it can still survive. It just can't fly. So if you don't have actual love or fear of God, which is either on an instinctive level or on a mindful level, mindful meditative level, then what happens is that your mitzvahs, the reward of your mitzvahs is stuck in the world of asiyah, in the world of action. It doesn't even rise to the lower Gan Eden, to the world of formation. It gets stuck. It's like a bird that can't fly. And the degree of godliness that you draw down to this world, the frequency of godliness, the energy that you draw down when you make the home for God is what energy? It's the energy of asiyah. It's not even level 2. You're kind of stuck. You're stuck without wings. So what happens now is, by the way, the Alter Rebbe points out, he says, on the world of Bria, it doesn't have to be a full-blown emotion. It could even be, we've learned, you may remember, in Tanya chapter 15 and 16, long time ago, Tanya chapter 15 and 16, we learned that when you meditate on the greatness of God, it doesn't have to create a full-blown emotion. It could even be a meditative emotion, which is like an intellectual emotion. What is an intellectual emotion? It means like a feeling that you should feel. Not that you feel love for God or fear of God, but that a feeling that you should feel love to God, or a feeling that you should feel fear to God. So even that is enough to serve as wings to let our souls fly, right? But if you don't have that, then you're like a bird without wings, you're stuck. What is the tikkun? What is the repair for such a divine service? Is that when eventually you do serve God with the right emotion, later one day when you serve God with the right emotion, with the right mindfulness or the right meditation, then it's going to elevate all of your prior mitzvahs. All the prior mitzvahs also are elevated as well during the subsequent mitzvah. So in other words, it serves like an aircraft carrier almost. Well, not an aircraft carrier, but like maybe whatever. Basically, all your mitzvahs are like birds without wings. And when you eventually find your wings, you lift everything up inside of a giant airplane. Those huge airplanes that carry the troops. You're stuck inside the airplane. You're just on the ground. But when the airplane eventually takes off, it picks up all the mitzvahs that came prior with it. There's actually another example that the Alter Rebbe uses. What happens if you'd serve God not out of habit, but out of the wrong reasons? So in other words, not only did you not have the right intentions, and you just served God for neutral, no reason, but imagine you served God for the wrong reasons, for selfish motives, for ulterior motives, maybe because you wanted people to respect you, you wanted people to call you rabbi, you wanted people to say how righteous or how pious you are. You've heard of the rabbi, and there's a good story about the rabbi, the imam, and the priest who are having a conversation about their eulogies. So, the priest says, in my eulogy, I want him to say, he was a learned man. He was a learned man. That's what I want him to say. He was a student of wisdom. The imam says, in my eulogy, I want him to say he was a kind man. He cared about other people. He was always there for the people. And then the rabbi says, at my eulogy, I want him to say, look, he's moving. So if you're learning Torah because you want people to say that you're great or to respect you, or maybe you want a job, if you're doing it not for a neutral reason, but you're doing it for a negative reason, now not only do you not have wings of love and fear to elevate your soul, your mitzvahs up to heaven, but now you actually are tying sandbags onto your bird, onto your neshama. Now your mitzvahs are actually tethered by klippa. Klippa is the term that we've used many, many times in Tanya to describe the forces of impurity. So now they're actually tethered to this world, and now the way that those kind of mitzvahs are elevated to heaven is not only when you study later on for the right reasons with love and fear, but also after you do teshuvah. You actually have to do teshuvah, to repent and to release your mitzvahs and Torah study to be able to soar up to heaven later on. There's a story of the Baal Shem Tov. The Baal Shem Tov once came into a Beis Medrash, a house of Torah study. And he commented, people were studying Torah, and he commented to the rabbi, the Rosh Yeshiva. He said, this yeshiva is packed with Torah. It's just absolutely packed with Torah. And the Rosh Yeshiva was so proud. He thought this was a compliment. He's like, wow, yes, we're so proud of the Torah. And the Baal Shem Tov says, no, you don't understand. the Torah, which should be rising up to the heavenly worlds of formation, creation, and emanation, is stuck here. Why? What he meant was, the Baal Shem Tov explained, there's no love and fear. There's no wings to the Torah study. Everybody here studying Torah is studying Torah either for neutral reasons or for the wrong reasons, because they're trying to outdo the other. And that's why their mitzvahs are lacking wings. Their mitzvahs are not soaring up to heaven. And I want you to apply that into the relationship with your spouse. You know, your spouse knows if you're doing things for the wrong reason. Your spouse will pick it up. If the only reason that you're being nice to your spouse is because you want something in return, sooner or later it's going to blow up in your face. And you know that your negative intention or your lack of intention, you know, it's better to do good things for the wrong reasons than to not do good things at all. But so at the same time, you know, it's going to blow up in your face, and you got to be careful. You got to be mindful of the importance of mindfulness, the importance of kavanah. Trying to seek Andy's comment, but mindfulness is preferred as you make a home for God, or are you saying Atzilus is mindless? Again, so Andy's comment, but mindfulness is preferred as you make a home for God, or are you saying a separate issue that Atzilus is mindless? Atzilus is not mindless, Andy. Atzilus is what we call super rational. It's higher than intellect. It's not the rejection of intellect. It's above intellect. It's the realization that I'm reaching levels where the brain cannot fathom. Okay? I'm reaching levels where the brain cannot reach. So the level of Atzilus, the world of Atzilus, the world of emanation, and this is a little deep out there, so bear with me for a moment. The world of Atzilus is a devotion to God or a devotion to your spouse on a level which is higher than rhyme or reason. It's a level which you cannot explain, which intellect cannot ever deal with. You know, it's like love. It's like when you love someone, even though it doesn't make sense. When you love someone, even though it doesn't make sense. If you had to rationalize your love, well, I love my child because he's an A student. Okay, so what happens if a child's not an A student? Well, my love defies that. It rises higher than my ability to understand. So you have to realize, Andy, that intellect is not the be-all and end-all. Intellect has a beginning and an end. And the Atzilus is accessing the realms that are above intellect. Let me know if that makes sense to you. In any event, here, as we conclude this idea here today, the Alter Rebbe says that just as it applies to Torah, it also applies to prayer as well. Even if you have a low energy level of kavanah, of mindfulness, of intent when you pray, even if you're praying just out of rote, your subsequent prayer with the right intention will elevate all the previous prayers. And that's why the Alter Rebbe says like this. He says, make sure that through 1 year, you're able to have every line should be recited at least once with the right intent. So if you can make sure that through the year, let's say you come to shul every Shabbos, let's say you daven every Shabbos. So if every Shabbos you make sure that one paragraph you recite with the right intent, then what happens? Everything else you say with just neutral intent. But one paragraph you recite with devotion, with emotion, with a little mindful meditation. What that does is that throughout the whole year, God will piece together, or the angels will piece together one complete prayer service that has the right intention that will elevate all of the previous prayers throughout the entire year previously. I'm glad you got it, Andy. Thank you. Thank you for understanding that. So this is the idea, friends. You know, the Alter Rebbe says it's always good to do the right thing for the wrong reason, because when you do the right thing for the wrong reason, you'll eventually come to do the right thing for the right reason. So don't be dejected. Don't be disappointed. Do the right thing for the wrong reason so that you'll end up doing the right thing for the right reason. It will happen that way. The Alter Rebbe guarantees, and he says, it bevadai for sure will be that way, and maybe not in this lifetime, maybe in the next reincarnation, he says. That's what he says in this chapter. It might be in the next reincarnation that you'll do the right thing for the right reason, but just don't give up. Don't say, I'm stopping to do the right thing because I'm doing the wrong reason. You know, somebody once came to the Alter Rebbe to say that he gives charity for the wrong reason. He gives charity to be respected, and that's why he's going to stop now, because he doesn't want to do a mitzvah for the wrong reason. And the Alter Rebbe says, no. Why should the poor people suffer because you're a shmendrik? Because you're doing the mitzvah of charity for the wrong reason. Why should the right people suffer? The poor people suffer. I guarantee you that the poor people are receiving the charity with the right intention. So you keep it up. And I want to conclude and say, just to wrap it all up, by saying that this is how we fulfill our purpose in this world. We're building not only a house for God through the action mitzvahs, we're actually building a home for God through the concentration, the meditation, the intention, the kavanah, the mindfulness with which we observe those mitzvahs. So we've learned the impact, the reward of the various degrees of our mitzvah mindfulness. And through the reward, we're able to identify the degree of the frequency of godliness that we draw down when we do the mitzvah. What kind of home are you building for God? Depends on what kind of mindful intention you had. And that's why I challenge you to mature your relationship with God. If your relationship with God is at the lowest level where it's all for the wrong reasons, keep it up. Serve God for the wrong reasons, because ultimately, through teshuvah, your subsequent serving God for the right reasons will elevate it. And if you're serving God merely out of habit, keep it up. It's going to come later. And if you're a little higher than that, you're able to serve God with a natural, instinctive love or emotion, just like we have an instinctive love for our children or for our spouses. And higher than that is the meditative emotion. An emotion born out of meditation, whether it's a full-blown emotion or it's just a mindful, intellectual emotion, a feeling for a feeling. That's the second world, the world of creation, the world of Bria, the world of creation. And if you're really good, if you're really spiritually mature, you're able to pierce all the way through to the world of Atzilus, to the world of emanation, the world of surrender, the world of Merkava, of chariot, where you become intimate with God and you say, God, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. Whether I understand or not makes no difference. And if you look at the words of King David in Psalms, this is what he talks about. Half the time he's talking about this level. It's a level that when you read Psalms on a regular level, you look at it, you're like, what is he saying? I don't even understand what King David's talking about, is what a lot of people tell me in Shul. But when you understand Tanya chapter 39, you can understand that David was in such a level so far removed from where we hang out. That's why we don't understand what the guy's even talking about. He says, God, most of the time, he's talking about a degree of commitment to God, which is on the world of Atzilus, the world of emanation, where he says, God, it doesn't make any difference to me how much you make me suffer. Though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I fear no evil, for you are with me, because all I need is you. That is Merkava. That is our aspiration. That is what we're reaching for. Thank you, Dean. I'm glad you got the message. Thank you, Andy. I appreciate your understanding what I was talking about. And thank you, Lucy, as well. Elaine, it feels like only tzaddikim would be able to reach Atzilus. That's why I said, Elaine, that all of us reach the level of Atzilus when we daven Amida. When you daven the Amida and you literally go through the motions, when you bow, the act of bowing, I want you to meditate on what you're doing. When you're bowing, you're surrendering your intellect before God. And for a fleeting moment, you're experiencing a taste of that intent, of that experience, which is the experience of Atzilus. It is not only for tzaddikim. You, Elaine, can do it too. You already do it. You're just not aware of it. And now that you know, knowledge is power. Pierce through to the world of Atzilus and stick around a little. It's a beautiful place to be. A great place to spend your next vacation. Anyways, friends, thank you for joining me this morning for today's Tanya class. I'm going to call it a day over here. Today's Tuesday. Corey gives a class at 11:30 on Hebrew language through King David Psalms. There you go, King David Psalms. It's 11:30 on Zoom, jewishgardens.com/Zoom. Thank you very much, everybody, for joining me today. Bob, thank you for your comment. Perfection. I love that. Thank you so much. I'm so grateful for me to be able to be a transparent messenger to deliver to you the purity, the authenticity, the brilliance of the Alter Rebbe's Tanya to you in a way that you're able to understand it and to relate to its power. Even though we're going through a computer screen and an internet connection over here. Thank you very much. I'm glad that you got it. Remember, friends, please share the video, like the video, review the video so that you can repeat and understand it better. Share it, like it, and review it, because that's what's going to allow you to deepen your connection and to mature your relationship with God. Thank you, Susan Pelosi. I appreciate your comments, and Terry Zweig as well. Really much appreciated, friends. It's an honor to learn with you every day. Thank you so much, and shalom. Have a wonderful day.